Hello there.
Hello, Markus Happel here. Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
Fine.
That's good. That's good.
You?
Everything is ready?
Yes. Hopefully, I'm ready. Yes.
Okay, that's perfect. We're still waiting for the other speakers to join in.
Yes.
And we will begin right at in 20 minutes and 17 minutes.
Okay. Yes, for sure.
Hello there. Would you like to test your screen, Dr. Marcus? You can.
Yes, I try. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, then I stop.
Right.
Okay.
That's perfect. How has your day been?
Quite okay. A lot of meetings, also with US colleagues. So in my afternoon, and yes.
Great. So I'm gonna put welcoming presentation.
But you are located in Prague, is that correct? Or
Hi, Noor. Can you hear me? It's Ian. Can you hear me, Noor?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. Oh, had a bit of technical difficulties at this end, but we seem to have managed to clutch victory from the jaws of defeat. So I'm pleased about
that. That's great. So have you checked
Marcus?
Everything is okay?
Yes, very well, thank you.
That's good. Would you like to try and share your screen?
Yes, I would. Hang on. Let's see. Going to see if I can do that. Do I get a choice of screens to share? Yes, I do.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I can see it, and you can put it.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
Great. That's good.
Oh, it has subtitles.
Oh, how do I stop that? Do you know? That's interesting. Do you know how to stop the subtitles?
Is it from your computer?
I don't think so. I've never seen these before. I'm on a different computer, actually. So that's slightly annoying. Let's have a look. If I share this screen, maybe. No, it just keeps coming onto there. Ah, there we are. That's it. There was a button at the bottom. Haven't seen that feature before.
Right. What was it? Is it from the slide presentation or from your computer itself?
It's actually in the slide presentation in PowerPoint. So this is my wife's laptop. So she's clearly got some advantages in technology over me.
Definitely. Definitely. I don't have that.
Very good.
Right. So I'm going to stop your screen sharing and I'm going to put the welcome screen share.
Okay.
Hello, Viswash.
Hey, Noor, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you.
So would you like to test? Oh, okay. You're not sharing the screen from your computer today, right?
No, Anthony is going to share it.
Perfect. Okay. So Anthony will be in a few minutes?
Yes, he'll be in a few minutes.
Viswesh, good evening. How do I pronounce your name correctly, just for information, if you don't mind me asking?
Ian, it's easiest to call me Vishy.
Vishy.
V-I-S-H-Y, Vishy.
Vishy. And your second name?
Subramanian.
Subramanian. Okay,
Yep.
Vishy.
Right.
There's a 1 in 10 chance of getting it right.
So Ian today will be the chairperson for this event, as I mentioned in our conversation on emails.
Awesome, Ian. Looking forward
to it. Be gentle
to
with me. That's all I say.
Sorry?
Be gentle with me.
You be gentle with me, and
it's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure.
You be gentle with me, and I'll pass on the.
You're the love. We're all one big happy family.
Yep. The transformation family.
Exactly.
Yep. Just give me one moment, guys. I'll be back in a moment. Yep.
So Ian, for the speaker slot with Vishy and Anthony, they will have this polls ongoing. I will, during their presentation, they will, on slide 7 or 6, I think they will have 2 polls to be presented by the to the audience, and I will control that. Okay. So I will just display the polls and display the results later on during the other slots.
Okay. Will they talk to that in their slots?
Yes.
They're running a poll. Okay.
You don't have to worry about that because the moment Viswesh and Anthony key that says that the poll should be up, and I will set that up.
Okay, no problem. Just bear with me a second.
Sure. So, Ian, are you able to see the Q&A box on the tab?
Let me just pop that up. Yes, I can see it. There's obviously nothing in there at the moment.
Yeah. So whenever the attendees, the participants send any questions in there, you'll be able to see the questions.
Okay.
And do not worry about which one to press, if it's answered live or if it's answered by written, because I can control that as well. Okay. If anything, I will be able to just let me know and I will be able to check for you.
Sure.
And you can regularly check on the Q&A box as well and ask participants if they would want to ask questions, they can send it there.
Okay.
So Noor, will we be able to get the Q&A for us directly? Or Ian would direct it to us?
Okay, you would be able to see it directly as well if you press the Q&A box down there. Can you see it?
Just give me a moment. Okay.
Are you able to see it?
I'm able to see the Q&A box.
Yes. So whenever someone asks the questions, the attendees ask the questions, it will appear there and you should be able to see it.
Okay, so Anthony, I guess his audio is just joining.
Yeah.
We can't hear you, Anthony.
Quick question for, he's on mute, but Marcus. Can I refer to you as Marcus, or do you prefer Dr. Marcus or Dr. Happel? You're on mute, just to...
No, Marcus, yeah.
Fabulous. I wasn't sure of the formality. Thank you. Thank you. Noor, is this the first Global Opex and Business Transformation Summit you've held? Is this the first of these sessions you've ever held as an organisation?
Oh no, we have done different events as well, and also events with Opex previously.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Dial in is not working for Anthony. Have you tried the number? Viswash, can you check the dial in number for Anthony? Oh yeah, it's working.
I am good. Can you
Hello,
hear me?
Anthony. Finally.
Hey, how are you? All right.
Good. Alexandra is here as well. Hello. Can you hear us, Alexandra? Perfect, yes. Is your microphone working? No, we can't hear you. Right. Alexandra, are you okay? Are you connected with using the link I sent you? The link that has been sent to you by Conferencia World email?
Hey, Vichy, how's my audio?
This is good, Anthony. You want to try and share your screen once to see if it works?
Yeah, there's no lag, right? Like how we had the last time?
You're lagging like half a second.
Okay, all right.
Do better. Do better.
Better? All right.
Yeah,
That's
try
good.
and share the screen once, Anthony, please.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good?
Okay. It's good.
So you see the presentation, right? You don't see like the speaker notes or anything like that, correct?
No, I see the presentation.
All right, and do you see the banner on top?
What banner?
That says like stop. Okay, cool. That's all I needed to know.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
So Ian, Marcus, Anthony is my partner in crime.
Okay.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Good
Sorry.
evening.
Alexandra, are you able to connect with your microphone? Still no? Okay, that's. Are you dialing in using the number as well?
No, so the problem I ran into, I accidentally put the meeting invite for the participant ID. So it added me as a participant versus adding me as a panelist.
Yeah.
So it looks like she did that. Yeah.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. So in the meantime, it's already 7 here in Europe and 10 there. I think we can begin now. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am Noor, the event organizer of Conferencia World. I'd like to welcome and thank you all to Global Opex and Business Transformation virtual event. Conferencia World is a professional event management company. We organize international conferences and aim to connect business leaders on a single platform in order to provide our participants with positive experience and bring the latest knowledge on the most important topics in the business. So for the virtual event today, we are more than happy to have 8 experts in OPEX and business transformation. I would like to introduce the chairperson for today's event. This person is the Director of Global Delivery Operations at Xerox. Over 20 years, he has enjoyed a diversity of experience spending time in sales, service, HR, communications, delivery, information security, and service improvement. A leader of many organizations' improvement programs, he is currently responsible for global renewals. He graduated with Bachelor with Honors from the University of Portsmouth. Without any further hesitation, I present to you Ian White.
Good afternoon. Are you sharing the screen?
Yes, sure.
The agenda. Okay, fabulous. Thank you, Noor. If you can put that on screen show for us. Terrific. And just to echo Noor's thoughts there, really welcome everybody to this event that we have this evening. Hugely privileged to be asked to chair the event. What will be, I'm sure, informative and insightful from some world leaders that we have to share with you their specific perspectives and observations on the topics at hand. So today we'll be focusing on global OPEX and business transformation, really 2 subjects that are probably at the foremost of most organizations thinking, given the context of where we all are over the last year. Suddenly, business transformation has leapt to the #1 priority that organizations have. So what you'll hear this evening, I'm sure you'll find very relevant to take back to your own business organizations and reflect in terms of some of the knowledge that you hear today. If you could turn to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. So the agenda that we have is a packed event. We have varying speakers to take you through various innovation ideas and events. So we'll kick off shortly with Dr. Marcus Happel, and he'll take us through design thinking to achieve business process innovation. Then we'll hand back to myself and I'll lead a session on process improvement culture in a decentralized environment. We'll then move over to Naveed Khawaja, and he'll share a session on purpose-powered performance. And then we have a dual session with dual presenters, Vishy Subramanian and Anthony Harris, and they'll be taking us through digital transformation insight, focusing on RPA, analytics, AI, really kind of informative and interesting topics. We'll then move to Naresh Sapuram, and he'll be taking us through transforming as adversity with cloud for growth, again, using and embracing new technologies to facilitate that drive. And then we'll hand over to Alexandra Riarte. We'll be talking about shifting from cost reduction to a growth mindset, again, critical in this current environment. And finally, but no means least, we'll be handing over to Jean Dahl, and she'll be taking us through organizational transformation from a holistic approach. As we go through the session, there'll be opportunity to ask Q&As, questions. So if you select the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen, you can ask a question, and there'll be time at the end of each of the presentations for those to be picked up. So please do take this opportunity to make this event interactive. The most successful of these events have always been where there's been dialogue with you as an audience. So maximize that opportunity. I hope you enjoy the event. And without further ado, I shall hand over to Dr. Marcus Happel. Marcus is a senior consultant at Lang Volcant. He has extensive knowledge and skills in project management and methodology, specifically design thinking and Lean Six Sigma. And his time with Deutsche Post, he led a number of global program initiatives, including some focused on digitization and robotics. So really apt, very current thinking for you. So without further ado, over to you, Marcus, if you can share your screen.
Thanks, Ian. I try to share my screen. Hold on. Can you see my screen?
We can indeed. If you could just put that onto screen view, that's fantastic.
You have that. Okay.
That's just the notes preview, so we can see your notes and the next slide. I don't know if you can just perhaps switch across.
Okay. So that's the way I. Oh, no. Maybe it's
fine, Marcus. Just
fine, I think, right? So, thank Ian for introducing myself. My short presentation is about design thinking on the one hand side, and also about how to innovate the processes and the process of innovation itself, and then also how you eventually are able with transforming your business. So, and as Ian has already described shortly my introduction, I have done recently a lot of also transforming project with Deutsche Post, DHL in Germany, but also on a worldwide scope. And you see, since last year, I've been with a small consultancy firm. However, it's also consulting larger corps in Germany, especially with BI, also transforming projects and with the customer buyer, for instance. So going into the details, design thinking. What is design thinking? It's a methodology, first of all. It's a approach how you can reach certain goals, and also ideally to transform your business. So, and it's not only a methodology, it's also how we call it today. It's an agile methodology, or a part of agility methodology. So that means in the past we had a waterfall approach for doing our projects. But with the approach of design thinking and agility, it comes to that we are not looking into detailed requirements in the very first step and then following the path, and hopefully we will have the solution as planned after a long period of time. Here we are talking about an agile methodology, design thinking, which is able to have iterations on your path, going through that process innovation path and to transform your business. And the process innovation, you can say design thinking is, however, that very often defined as a very customer-centric development process for which you are envisaging valuable and sustainable solutions and products for your customer. So in that way, you have a process innovation. That's the path. And you start this with an analyze phase, of course, but a very practical one, saying, okay, go and see, the so-called Gemba walks. So you start with that and you start workshops, and then you're starting designing your solutions, and maybe over the project phase, you redefine your processes, your solutions, your products you are envisaging. And again, it's not just a waterfall, very detailed workout of your first requirements. It's also a kind of a trial and error process. And this makes also the kind of innovation where the people are working together with what they have found at the very first place. This is, on the one hand side, the process innovation. But also, when we're talking about design thinking and how you create and support the process innovation, then you need to talk about change management. That means you have to have the people in place for your project, for your design thinking approach. And over that kind of time, when you're doing your project, you have to change the behavior and the attitude of the people. That means the people maybe on the blue collar worker level, but also on the senior management level. This is very important because even for them, it's important to understand that this is a new approach, an agile approach, how you can get the innovation and the transformation of your business. So, and then in the end, you have hopefully an achievement in transforming your business, your structures, your solutions. You try to improve. So as I said, talking about design thinking, it's always a very customer-centric approach, and how you can drive and improve your solutions and your products. And when you're doing that, how can you do that? First of all, you start what is feasible in terms of your technology. So you have especially in that design thinking process, you start with what do I understand? what do we understand? What's the situation? And you can also apply the very straightforward approach for root cause analysis and the 5 why approach. Maybe you might have heard of that from McKinsey originally. So what is exactly the reason for a problem? What's exactly the current status where we are? I think this is the starting point, and also open question regardless what have been done in the past. And from that starting point, then you try to design what you try to envisage. And then also you design something, you're getting your ideas on board, you prototype something, and you test your solution. Whether a physical application or an IT application, whatever it might be. But this is a regular process, and always the feasibility of that. And again, as I said, it's an agile one. Within the pure method of that way I have tried to explain, it's always the ability to go back and have a trial and error to improve what I've already designed, what I have in place for my prototype. I think this is very important and the basis here for having better solutions. And then also the profitability is not just the second part. It's not just saying, okay, we would like to have lower costs and we cut the costs. It's also thinking in terms of, yes, higher value to the customer, and then we ourselves have higher profitability because higher margin after prioritizing our efforts in better, higher value adding solutions. And the third fact is, as I already put out, is the factor of human. When I'm talking about the phases, starting with understand what's the real issue is, then you have everybody on board. You have to start with workshops, with cross-functional teams to share their ideas, to share their expertise, to have that in place. And that means then you create an atmosphere and for innovation that makes it happen. These 3 things. And what is also very important is the collaboration. Design thinking and agility is always about collaboration. Then you're getting teams within you are working, and maybe also teams of teams within you are working. And then you get a better understanding on the people and the expertise, and also on the solutions in the end for each of the teams, and maybe for the whole team, for the whole group of people. And it's not only that this is one project, maybe you can do that on a constant basis, so that you have workflows of a set of projects. So you try to have a workflow of projects. Then in the end, you have, and then coming back to that customer value, then you hopefully have a flow which in the long run you have higher value adding solutions for your customer. And then you wouldn't have any issues like the car manufacturing industry, especially in Germany, might face in terms of how can we introduce the new technology of electronical engines. So a steady constant flow of projects in this time and with all the people. And then also you have exciting results, not only for your customer, but also within your team. So this is more or less the approach of design thinking. And what I can also tell you what I have experienced and what I have done with Deutsche Post with the design thinking approach, and to achieve a transformation in that industry of warehousing. We tried in that the whole group of Deutsche Post DHL group and in my business unit where I'm working in, we tried to find a way of having a higher level of digitization, and how can we transform our business into that level. And therefore we had the approach of having a lighthouse within our business unit. And we chose a fulfillment center, a warehouse, 20 years old, more or less, well-established processes, high efficiency, profitable fulfillment center. But also we had the issue that more or less old people are working there. So the demographic factor was a factor. So the business itself, the Deutsche Post, was depending on those people, especially in a location on a rural area where almost no unemployment rate have been there. So we try to transform that kind of business into a new one. And there we applied that design thinking approach, where we had, let's say, a workshop with all the people, with all, with all the people, with people coming from the innovation department, people from the senior level, senior management, also from the blue collar worker level. And we worked together in several workshops, and we had, as I said, a Gemba walk. Go and see what in practice is there. What's the problem? And how can we fix it? And how can we improve something? And this is a very first step to go the path of design thinking, as I explained already. And then we decide, okay, we have some applications there to start that process, that transformation process. And we decided to have in that fulfillment center with a follow me robot. It was a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Nobody had that in the world, that kind of follow me robot, and which facilitates the blue collar worker carrying goods from location A to location B within the warehouse. And it facilitates also the working condition for the people. And they said, okay, great. We had also some other applications, such as depalletizer, an exoskeleton for facilitating to unload and load boxes, parcels. And also we had a self-driving cleaning machine. And we had these applications, and we tried to do it with them, and we set up a testing phase. And together with especially with the Workers' Council, we do it. Yeah. And they also they were really keen on getting those applications in place, because it could also give the workers better working conditions. So in the end, we decided to have that follow me robot as a prototype. After the testing phase, we have the prototype, then we fixed some bugs, and then afterwards we implemented this. And it was, in the end, it was a great success for the people. They liked this. All the blue collar workers, the senior management, the leaders on that site, and even the Workers' Council. And we could pull any fear from the people, from the Workers' Council, saying, okay, robotics, that's a bad word, and it just replacing the factor, the human being. No, it was not like that. It was improving the working conditions, and that's why we could also improve the with our business model. And we could also share this good example within the whole business unit and also with all stakeholders in the whole group. And this also enabled us to start other processes, RPA, robotics process automation, in other departments, in other areas of our business. So this is a very starting point how we could together innovate and transform our business. I think that's it. Very short. And if I had the opportunity to have more time, then I would also give you some pictures on the Follow Me robot and whatever to give you a better picture on what I have tried to explain you. So that's it from my end. Any questions?
Fantastic. Thank you, Marcus. I think that was amazingly interesting in terms of the application of the design thinking that you took to Deutsche Post to do that introduction. Just one question actually that sort of occurred to me. What would you say was perhaps the key driver behind the success of the use of that design thinking? For example, was it engaging multiple stakeholders, blue collar workers, management all together to come up with the solutions? Or was it the excitement about the technology? What was the key factor that drove the successful outcome, would you say?
Very good question. And I think somehow you already answered it because you have mentioned two things: the combination of people and the very interesting topic of robotics. Yeah. So I cannot really say this is better than the other one. Yeah. So, but these are the two key factors. Yeah. The combination, yeah, of the people, and they like this approach of the Follow Me robot. They like that really, really much. And I don't know which name, but they gave this Follow Me robot also a name. Yeah. So because they loved that kind of new colleague, and I think it's a combination. But I think in the end, above all, and this is most important, you create an open atmosphere that you are one team and everybody is invited to give their insights, the experience, on which level, wherever.
Okay, perfect. The humanization of the robots. I like it. Fantastic. Okay, so moving on.
Ian?
Yes,
there is a question in the chat box.
Okay.
How do we get leadership to acknowledge at the first place that operational excellence needs their support on identifying process to be transformed and messaging to the ORG? There's in the chat box a question from Isabella Harrington.
So
yes, I see.
Is it a question to me or?
I think it's to all panelists or maybe to Dr. Marcus.
So
I think Nora, is quite a general, it's a really great question actually. It's a general question around sort of the engagement of leadership to embrace operational excellence. I think if we park that for now, but absolutely come back to it at the end, we can touch on that question because there'll be some more thought that's come from everybody else, if that's okay. Should we do that?
Yes, sure.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So, and don't forget, in terms of the Q&A, there is, I think, a Q&A button specifically that you should be able to access. But if you can't and you want to use the chat, that's perfectly fine as well. So, Marcus, if you could stop sharing your screen, and then I will just share my screen now. So hopefully, Noor, you can see my screen.
Right. We're not able to see a screen yet.
You're not? Okay, let me see if I can share again. I'll try again.
Sure.
Is that coming through?
Yes, perfect.
It is. Fabulous. The technology is working. Excellent. We've all embraced the use of this new technology, so I should have no excuses in that regard. So first off, my 10 minutes or 15 minutes followed by some questions is really around a case study around specifically how do you drive process improvement culture in a decentralized environment? And that question that came up from Isabel may be addressed by one or two of the points that we have contained here. So let me first off talk about a little bit about the case study. It's around Xerox. So a bit of background in terms of Xerox would probably be useful here. So innovation is something that we consider is part of our very lifeblood. It's contained within the DNA of our organization, certainly perhaps a lot of yours. Xerox itself was founded based on the invention of the electrostatic copy by Chester Carlson, and then continually improved, developed further until it became a commercially viable product. And the photocopier, as we know it, was launched in 1959. So a period from 1938, when the invention happened, to 1959, where there was continuous improvement. So really that concept of continuous improvement was in the very sort of cradle of existence of the organization we have. And I guess when we think about cultural change, sometimes we think about evolution. It's a gradual process, a gradual shift in sands, one way of thinking replacing another. But for us, faced in the 1970s as we were with competition for the first ever time, we had the patent on the photocopier. Suddenly coming into the market was a higher quality product, lower cost, and that saw a dramatic change in shift of customer loyalties. So a cultural revolution was needed, and our focus was on quality. So quality really enabled us to see a return to market leadership and numerous quality awards through the 70s and 80s. This quality culture was really founded upon problem solving and continuous process improvement. So again, embracing that concept earlier, it continued through the quality journey. And driving this cultural dynamic on, I guess, we embraced in the early 2000s Lean Six Sigma, a concept that many of you will be familiar with, and you'll certainly be hearing some more of that later on. Really, for us, it was an organization-wide program to engage and train our employees in the art and the skills of Lean Six Sigma, so that they embraced those process improvement skill sets. And underpinning that was really the philosophy of seeking process excellence, documenting, refining, avoiding waste, all those factors that we're very familiar with in terms of process excellence. So in turn, underpinning that was a dynamic of centralized quality and process excellence teams. So we had centralized teams that we built out who were really the champions, the gurus of subject matter expertise, and they lent their authority out. This is the concept of the black belts that you may be familiar with, or even within our organization, the master black belts. So really complex processes were able to be worked through and shifted through this culture. But the organization has been continually reinventing itself and its own operating model, so to drive continual productivity in an ever more competitive environment. So thus we embraced right shoring as a concept, and we moved more to a decentralized operating structure. So that kind of evolution, driven in some cases by revolution, the 70s change, really led to that sort of drive and that change for us as an organization. So if we think about sort of the cultural change, I guess, from sort of, what would be top down to bottom up, why do that change? What are the benefits? What does moving to a decentralized bottoms up approach really offer? Well, I guess the primary importance for us and for everyone in our existence is our customer. It has to be. There's no surprises there. So to move the ability to make decisions, improve processes closer to the customer is really where you drive the greatest value. It delivers the greatest impact, so makes absolute business sense. Yes, it means there's some perhaps variation because you're empowering individuals closer to the customer to make those decisions, but ultimately it's driving greater customer satisfaction because of the efficiency that that drives out. And obviously, in terms of the employees themselves, being closely connected with the customer is where that customer intimacy comes. And we need that to ensure that our employees are empowered to not only embrace, but actively drive change as well. So success is celebrated. It's again, something that's important, associated with process improvement. We learn, we reflect, but where we see success, we absolutely celebrate. We have a culture of celebrating success within the organization. Failure is not criticized, as we would see it's a learning opportunity. So to experiment and try is encouraged. Reflective learning is positively promoted. And this change in approach really drives growth quickly. Of course, cultural change doesn't happen overnight. We talked about before the revolution in terms of the way that culture changes. So dimensions of cultural change identified, we called them out. We drove a program of cultural change to underpin this. So we had simple, clear communication from the leadership in terms of underpinning this process change. And it manifested itself almost in a simple booklet, a guideline. These were built into performance review metrics, and there were cultural dimensions that we focused on, and we focused our management teams on for driving that active change. So built upon that quality foundation that I talked about in terms of our history, employees absolutely embraced the concept of, and change ultimately was initiated. So, of course, once you empower, you've let a genie out of the bottle. People want more. And when you encourage it and you foster it and you see the results of it, absolutely, it's exponential, the opportunity that it drives. So it's hard to put back, but we didn't want to put it back. So that kind of decentralized culture rightly is there, and it's protective of its own new status, its own independence, if you like. But direction is still required. There is leadership direction, facilitation, and support to drive that process forward. So if we kind of move on then and think about how to drive process excellence. So we talked about the history, we talked about the change in approach. So driving process excellence across what we have as a global workforce has advantages and disadvantages associated with it in terms of driving that. So from the positive side, whilst I mentioned that there isn't absolute consistency, broadly we have consistency of approach. So as we are dealing with global customers, they are expecting in all of their operations to have consistency of service. So driving consistent processes into a process measurement, so there is a tool to measure the implementation of those processes, you have consistency. And consistency lends itself to efficiency and lends itself to productivity. And that in turn enables people to understand more about the processes and reduce levels of risk associated with the process as well. So we call out, we identify, we flag risk as part of our process excellence culture, and we reduce risk by mitigation or accepting the risk and calling it out and moving forward. So that efficiency I touched on, critical sort of element in terms of that sort of consistency of operation. And ultimately, I mentioned the genie out of the bottle. It's quite empowering. It's enthusiastic for employees to feel that they have that sense of ownership, and in turn that drives customer satisfaction. So it's a strongly leaning advantageous approach. But of course, there are challenges. I talked about culture. Driving that cultural change is evolutionary. We didn't expect to get, and we didn't deliver cultural change overnight. So the expectations from leadership were very much that this was a long-term game. This was setting the seeds to reap the rewards, sowing the seeds to reap the rewards later. So clear, defined strategy. If you don't have it, it's a real challenge. So again, to the point that was raised earlier, you need to be clearly defined in the process excellence goals that you set out. Also, having access to tools and to resources to facilitate that. In terms of empowering individuals, they will still need some support, some guidance. So there is some, we made and chose to make some business decisions around investment in those particular areas to help us through. So there are some challenges there to consider, but of course the advantages for us certainly sort of outweighed in terms of the discussion. So moving on in terms of our next area of focus, we really then sort of started, well, okay, so you've got this kind of community of operational excellence, and you've also got a community of service improvement excellence, the sort of the subject matter gurus that I mentioned earlier. How do you keep them both aligned? How do you keep them both engaged? What we found was our service improvement champions felt they owned the processes. They owned the process of process improvement. So they were proud of it, and they were experts in that. So we didn't want to remove that. We wanted to embrace that. But of course, the more our operational teams got engaged in process excellence, the more enthusiastic and expert that they became. So it was a case of lending knowledge and growing knowledge from one community through to another, which again drove opportunity for our real subject matter experts to spread further afield and wider in their reach. So having clearly defined strategies to support it, as I mentioned on the previous slide, we absolutely drove that through the organization. We fostered and championed the subject matter expertise. The service improvement managers were there, their skills were there to absolutely be capitalized on and used by the operational community. And where we saw successes with the two communities coming together in terms of the centralized and the decentralized, we shouted about it, we talked about it, we got the operational teams to communicate to their operational peers and their colleagues about the successes, to therefore drive further focus on using the centralized resource when the centralized resource was needed. But of course, resource return on investment for us was maximized because the ownership of process improvement was with the operational community. So to do that and to keep that drive and that focus, our operational teams are focused on driving for their customers a customer satisfaction, but also they're accountable to drive a growth ambition within our own organization. So where benefits were defined, where we could identify processes, we try to address or monetize the value of that process. Again, I think this is a critical point. If you are looking at process improvement, if you have an opportunity to add a dollar value to that, the focus and the interest and the result can be clearly measured, and it serves to reinforce and drive the process forward. And then obviously recognizing the achievements of those individuals becomes part of the success measure. So to underpin it, finally, tools and techniques, really just to share with you some of the things that we did. We had service improvement tools, we had service improvement plans, we had a global service delivery model against which we assessed all of our operations and their processes. We scored them, we had a tool to score them, to really see where the gaps were in the operation, and therefore, if we had the gaps, we could address them. When requests came into the central resource, they could be far-ranging. So the central resource developed a complexity calculating tool. So how difficult is that problem to actually resolve? And by applying some standard criteria, we were able to determine the level of difficulty associated with it, and thus assign and accredit the right level of resource to fix it. A priority calendar was built, so really to enable a pipeline to be developed so that teams, and we were open with this, could see what the availability of that subject matter expertise was. And importantly, the subject matter experts could also feed the pipeline, almost, if you like, a sales type prospect, So identifying from suspects, this might be a process to improve, through to prospects, it's been qualified through the process improvement process. And again, that capitalizes on both communities, the centralized team and importantly, the decentralized culture that we've got. And finally, it's underpinned, as all of our processes are, I'm sure yours are as well, with really crystal clear analytics, incisive analytics to help us drive as much decision-making or in an automated fashion as we possibly can. So all processes are underpinned through data, and data then drives the effective change. So these were not tools that we got off the shelves. We developed them from existing material we had, or we created through the teams of service improvement. So so anyway, it certainly delivered the success measures that we were looking for. So finally, if we go on to the summary at the end, just before I turn to some questions, I just lost my slide there. Hang on a second. Let me just project again. There we go. So if I just turn to the summary, strategy and leadership, critical to this. If you don't engage your senior stakeholders, and there may be some on the calls today in terms of process improvement, that culture, that cultural shift will not happen. You need to have leadership. Leadership needs to be informed. They need to be shared, the developments that actually accompany that. But it's a critical measure of success. Adaptation to environmental impacts. Don't be too blinkered in the views. If there are changes around you, such as clearly the changes that we've seen in the last 12 months, understand that, embrace that change, support your customers through that change. Listening to the customer becomes critical. And for us, our continuous improvement journey will continue. It continues through our decentralized environment. We've seen tremendous gains and benefits, employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction as a consequence. So that concludes the session that I wanted to run. Were there any questions, Noor, that came up during that session?
No, there were no questions.
Okay, fabulous. All right, so if we can now sort of move on, I will stop my sharing, I think.
Yes.
If I can. Maybe Noor, if you can.
Sure, I'll do that.
Just help me sort of stop the show. So I'll hand over now to Naveed Kavaja. Naveed is a master trainer and coach, thought leader. He's been employed and worked with customers globally, really focusing on agile and lean thinking. Really excited in terms of what you've got to share today, Naveed. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian. I hope you can hear me well.
We can.
Okay, excellent. It's an honor to be here, and I feel like at a disadvantage right now because what Dr. Marcus Happel has added and what you've just mentioned, Ian, absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate your sharing your wisdom and experiences. One of the things that really resonates with me is the Master Blackbird thing. I was with Xerox for about 6 years in the R&D UK Center in Welwyn Garden City, and some excellent memories I have. In fact, the 6 patents I have were when I was with Xerox. So it was a very, very innovative environment. Okay.
Congratulations on that. Congratulations on that in terms of patent development. Again, it's part of that innovation culture that I talked about. Yeah. So hearing that background is it's amazing.
Yes, thank you. So I'll try to keep it short. There is a concept I want to share, and I will try to cover a recent initiative that is really, really close to my heart. And this is all related to the purpose-powered performance, which is the topic of my speech. We talked about revolutions, and it is a very highly talked about concept. And we say we are in this new industrial revolution, or this is a new kind of revolution, and its pros and cons, and what used to be great is not great anymore, and things are changing so rapidly over the last. We all know what has happened in 2020. So 2021 is going to be a game changer from that perspective. But what I see is just three revolutions. First, the production revolution, then the productivity revolution, and the one which we are in, many people have recognized it and others are gradually recognizing, it's called purpose revolution. And the production revolution, I'll quickly touch upon it. You all know it. I'll just mention that when Henry Ford introduced this moving assembly line, it was the beginning of this era of industrial revolution. But it didn't just mean that there was higher production. It doesn't mean that we built a car. It was a culture change that brought in this concept of taking away the uniqueness of people, taking away the creativity of many people and putting them on an assembly line and making them into button pushers. Many people lost their amazing skills at that time as well. But because they were paid well, they chose to be the button pushers on those production lines. And that had its impact on the society. And we know what has happened. The GDP, the thing that we all talk about. I can't cover that in a short time, but one question I'll leave with you on that topic is GDP is an income statement. It is not a balance sheet. If we keep measuring growth of countries on GDP and not considering the impact their growth is having on the rest of the world, we have missed the point. We are messing it up completely. So we have to make sure when we talk about GDP, we talk about the balance sheet that comes with it, not just the income statement. And a simple example of that is if I earn 100,000 pounds this year and last year, and I earned 200,000 pounds this year, does that mean that I am profitable as an individual? If you just measure from a GDP perspective, I grew 100%, but it could be that I took so many loans and I increased my expenses so much that my household expenditure went up from 80,000 pounds a year to 500,000 pounds a year. The income increased, the GDP increased 100%, but the overall situation is very dire. So remember, insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. If we just keep measuring our progress based on GDP, we are making a mistake. And the Industrial Revolution forces that thought process into us on a daily basis. What the Industrial Revolution brought with it was people started asking for more, bigger, faster, cheaper, now, all the time, everything right now, upsizing things, making sure that people got more and they got it more now at any cost. And businesses kept on making money at any cost. And when that happens, somebody is losing out somewhere in the world. But that is ignored. And the Industrial Revolution ignored quite a lot of that from a pollution perspective, from so many other aspects of the society perspective. The same person who brought the Industrial Revolution at that time said, Henry Ford said, a business that makes nothing but money is a poor business. Think about that. Reflect on that. I do that. I've been doing that for many years now. And I realize those businesses who have just been making money over the last few decades, they are at a big loss right now. If you think about it, what has happened to the extreme volatility of this consumerism that we've just seen? Many of those brands have just disappeared and nobody cares. Why would somebody care for some of those brands when they don't add any value to people's lives? Think about it. What would make that difference? So we've just touched upon the Industrial Revolution. I'll quickly touch upon from the production revolution to productivity revolution. This productivity revolution, from my perspective, is all about the things that we just talked about, the Agile, Lean, Kanban, Lean Six Sigma, design thinking, all the good things and the combinations of those. And over the last 15 years, I've been doing all of this as well, helping organizations transform and overall redefining their cultures and educating people and coaching them and consulting them and solving their problems and helping them become more profitable and all sorts of things. But if you think about it, the same productivity revolution has brought some challenges with it. What are we optimizing for? That is the question I want you to think about. Again, that reflection from this point is the same companies that the Standard & Poor's ratings, they used to stay in those S&P 500 ratings. Once a company reached S&P 500 rating, it would stay there for 30 to 35 years. Now, recent times, it is around 10 years or less. What's happening? They are very profitable, they are optimized, they're doing amazing things, they're quite lean. But what is missing? There is something wrong somewhere that is forcing this change, this desire of people to do good, and not just allowing those globe ruining enterprises who are actually having a big negative impact on this world. So we have to be very cautious of what is going on. The good thing is many of the enterprises have actually defined or redefined their purpose, and they have defined their vision, and they've started focusing on adding value. But what does it mean? What it means is 47% of the jobs will disappear in the next 15 years. Imagine that half of the jobs that exist right now are going to be, they're just going to disappear. Imagine somebody has been working in a role for 20 years, who cannot do anything else. Their job disappears. What would happen? This is a serious challenge at hand. The good thing is the artificial intelligence and all these automation related initiatives, RPAs and IoTs, in 2021, this year, it's going to generate 2.9 trillion in business value, $2.9 trillion. And it's also going to reduce this waste in the industry. 6.2 billion hours of worker productivity that will be saved or recovered in 2021. Imagine that impact. 50% of the jobs are going to disappear, and we're going to save so much. So where is this going to go? When we save those hours, where are we going to use them? We have to think, reflect on those. I'll skip this for now, but the important point is this: the statement below from The Economist. Many of the executives realize that yes, 70% of them say, oh yeah, it's extremely important for their business to use AI and those automations. But they also say only 2% of them have achieved the broad positive impacts. That means the way they are utilizing AI is not really benefiting them. So there is some gap, something that is missing even in the application of AI. One of the biggest gaps is they're just focusing on giving mundane to the machine. That is only one side of the picture from my perspective. There is another one. I'll touch upon that shortly. But mundane to the machine means anything that is repeatable should be passed on to the machines, because we are wasting humans' creativity and talent and time on something that the machines can do. We as humans, each and every person on this call has a gift. You all have a gift. That gift needs to be found and then utilized. We can't just give our think that we are machines who can do the repeat tasks happily forever. Our intrinsic motivation is lost when we have to do the same things over and over again. We all know that. You've been there. I've been there many times. So the good thing here is the AI adoption journey, according to the different journals here, mentioned the MIT Sloan report. 85% of this the survey, they view AI as a strategic opportunity. Now, what does that mean? Is it a cost reduction or modernization, insights driven organization development, or a new business development? What is going on? What's the best way to utilize the AI? From my perspective, it is all about transformation. We need to transform the organization in two aspects. One is giving the mundane to the machine. Amazing, you're going to save a lot of time with the hours saved. But then the other side, you are going to give people opportunities to be creative, to become more innovative. That breathing space that we all need will be developed using AI. I feel that is the most important benefit of having artificial intelligence initiatives. Now, I assume all of you, I do all the time, We've been purchasing fair trade organic bananas. I assume that most of you have bought them. Can you imagine why would we pay more for the similar looking bananas? What is it that gives us this thought process of, oh, I'll pay more for something that I can get for less? These bananas, fair trade bananas, pass on the benefit to the farmer. That gives us intrinsic motivation. Why? Because we are adding value to people's lives. If it wasn't a fair trade banana, who are we benefiting? You think about that, you answer that yourself. There is a growing demand for fair trade because we all are good human beings. We are good by heart. We want to help each other. We want this planet to nurture. We want this planet to stay safe and grow. And that fair trade is one of the most important initiatives that we need to focus on. So what is your purpose? If you come across 4 people, for example, as shown on the screen, you go to ask them, what are you making? All of them are essentially doing the same thing. It all depends on what they're thinking while they're doing their job, how their daily contribution is impacting the big picture. First person you go to, they say, what are you doing? He says, I'm laying bricks. Second one, you go, they say, I am building a wall. The third one you go to, they say, I'm building a room. Do you think there's a difference in the motivation levels of these? They're doing essentially the same thing. Same thing happens in our teams. They're working on some tasks on a daily basis, similar tasks in many cases. What will be the difference of the motivation of somebody? You go to the 4th person and say, what are you doing? They say, I'm making a hospital where people will get treated and they'll save their loved ones. Do you think the quality of work will have an impact? I definitely think so, because I've been in those situations where when I know I jump off the bed every single day when I'm working on a task that is going to add value to people's lives, when I'm actually having an impact on people's life, that's my pursuit of purpose. Now, in my organization, in my recent projects, and I'll just skim through this because I know it's quite a tight deadline. The initiative that I've been working on is the affordable cancer diagnosis using artificial intelligence. And this is a nationwide initiative in Pakistan right now, and it will go to the neighboring countries very soon as well. 221 million people, out of which 70 million are 15 years or above. These 70 million women are at risk in Pakistan of breast cancer. Every 9th woman is likely to suffer breast cancer in Pakistan, according to the Journal of the Medical Journal of Pakistan. Pakistan has the highest rate of breast cancer in Asia. There's affordability issue, the accessibility issue, accuracy issues, all sorts of issues in cancer diagnosis. Now, when we see that, it's a volcano that is ready to erupt. So what we did was, for about 2 years, we've been researching on developing an algorithm that digitizes the biopsy slides, uses AI and deep learning to identify the patterns. And then our paper has just been published as well. So again, another publication for you, Ian. I now have 27 publications. So this one is the latest one, and got approved a couple of weeks ago. This is where we have proven a technique that is 89% accurate. It is a very, very competitive, cutting edge, bleeding edge research that we've just done. And the algorithm has been proven. The current accuracy rate in Pakistan by the histopathologists is around 50%. And that means half of the time they are misdiagnosing you. Our algorithm is quite unique and is very advanced, and it's quite accurate right now. We presented to the president of Pakistan, the Minister of Science and Technology, and all others. So, and we defined their aim. We said, okay, we're going to improve the survival rate from 50% to 90% by 2025. Now, this is the breast cancer survival rate in Pakistan. Think about it. Is this going to be motivating to my team? Has it been motivating to my team or myself? It does, because I can't sleep properly. It's so exciting. I jump off the bed every day. I go to extended hours all the time without any worry of time or the investment that I'm doing on all of that, because I am actually giving mundane to the machine and purpose to the people. Because the same doctors who are redefining or picking up the patterns of the known disease, we are saying pass it on to the machine. And then the same doctors, we are saying utilize your creative mind to solve complex problems so that the accuracy rate increases, so that you can have some challenging problems to solve. And then you stay motivated. And we're doing that. And what that brings is we are making them so wiser, smarter, fitter, closer, tougher, cleaner. All those good things about purpose-powered performance are all engraved in this. And what it does brings to me is happiness. What it brings me is the energy. And what it helps me answer is our business transformation business, and our artificial intelligence technology-based automation business. It is doing something beyond making money. It is improving people's lives. And it is not just making a hospital per se. It is actually making ethical profitability, where poor will be treated for free, diagnosed for free, and then the others will pay, and the system will be self-sustainable. It will balance itself out. So from my perspective, if your business doesn't have a purpose, leave every other part of transformation aside. Focus on finding your purpose. What difference is your business making to people's lives, improving their lives? What is it going to do? For yourselves, if you want to run a marathon, if you want to run 100 meters in less than 10 seconds, like Usain Bolt, you need to start practicing on a daily basis. It can't be a quarterly, it can't be a yearly target. It has to be a daily target. A dose of motivation that will really drive your passion and energy. And at this point, generally at my keynotes globally, when I'm in person, I take a selfie on the stage, but we are virtual. So here's a virtual selfie for you. And with that, I thank you all for the opportunity, and thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Naveed.
Okay.
Hugely engaged, hugely interesting in terms of the content there. Congratulations on your 27th sort of publication, but also nature of the work and what you're trying to do is amazingly rewarding, and I can see why it drives you so much. I did get slightly worried about the 20 years, given I'm a 27-year servant to Xerox, that suddenly my career may be ending very swiftly, but amazing, really great. So are there, I'm not sure if there's any questions. We've had some comments already coming in. Wow, very inspirational. Thanks for sharing, Naveed. Absolutely, I echo that that thought from Lubna in terms of the comments. So I don't think we've got any other sort of open questions. So I guess with that we'll move on. So if you can stop sharing, and then if we can then hand over to Vishy. So Vishy Subramanian. Vishy is a banking financial services transformation expert. Has been with for 25 years. His particular specialty has been in transformation and RPA and AI, which obviously Naveed just sort of touched on as well, and ML. So really excited for what you've got to share with us in terms of this, Vishy. So over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll turn it over to Anthony to start off. Anthony is my partner in crime in this endeavor, and we'll take it from there. Anthony, over to you.
Yeah, thank you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and thanks for taking the time to join our session. As far as a quick background on myself, I'm a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, a Scaled Agile Framework practitioner with roughly 16 years of experience across banking, financial services, specifically around transformation and strategy consulting. With that said, I want to, before I pass it over to Vishy, cover a couple of things. First, that this presentation does not reflect or contain any data, information, or practices related to our current employer. And also, we've embedded 2 polls within our presentation to make it more interactive. So we hope that you take the time to answer those. And related to questions, please capture your questions leveraging the Q&A button. And we hope to be able to have enough time left over to address all of those. So with that said, we're looking forward to a rich and interactive discussion and around the perception versus reality related to automation within banking and financial services. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Vichy to kick us off.
Hey, thanks, Anthony. Ian, thanks for the kind words and the introduction. I don't need to introduce myself now, but good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who are part of this online webinar. And a special call out to people who are formally dressed on the top and who have pajamas or shorts on the bottom. That's been our way of life for over a year now, right? That was a call out for you too, Anthony. Okay, so the uh, the new normal in banking and financial services institutions driving transformation to automation. Everyone's written about it till the cows come home. It's been written for almost 5 to 6 years as of now, as automation being the new normal in banking. But are we really there? Is the daring question we want to ask. We don't think banking and financial services is really there when it comes to driving transformation through automation. But today is about time for that change, and banking and financial services institutions are at a point where they do not have a choice but to drive real outcomes using automation to drive transformation. And it's common sense in terms of why today, right? The pandemic has approximately eroded around 7 to 9% of the global GDP over the last 1 year. That's a huge amount of money disappearing from the face of Earth in a year. Uh, Look at it the other way around too. The backbone for global economies, which run the money across the economies across the globe, are small and medium enterprises. The impact of small and medium enterprises because of this pandemic has been significant globally. And how are they going to recover to be the bloodline of the economy going further? And add on top of it the socioeconomic situations, the political situations, the trade wars, the boundaries being redrawn, and the lack of ease of doing business globally. This in itself is going to potentially impact the banking industry significantly and is going to push the banking industry against the wall to say, hey, start driving real transformation now. Let's start speaking and let's start driving real transformation now. Now, let's go back to the year 2000. Next slide, Anthony. There was this great conversation in 2000 or around about 1996 about this big gorilla in the room called Y2K, right? It was predicted that Y2K is going to change the world. The computing is going to be severely impacted come 1st of January 2000. And what is the problem? The problem was very simple. To a very large extent, the computers had difficulty changing their dates from 31st December 1999 to 1st January 2000. Isn't that funny? And technology companies made a ton of money on this problem for 3 to 4 years. And the consumers lost money. And there's also a lot of bold predictions that was done in 2000 for something that may happen by 2020. One is our developed nations are going to have automated vehicles all over our streets. We would have completely embraced a digital currency. We will have robots helping us do our household chores. Menial tasks will be moved and run by artificial intelligence, robotics, and machine learning. Are we there yet? I don't think we're there. The sheer fact that we are still not confident about our automated vehicles to be running on the road means there is a whole lot of transformation that needs to happen for all these to be a reality. Now, we want to focus on where is the gap in driving this transformation and how can it be potentially plugged. One thing to keep in mind, specific to banking and financial services institutions, is for all the industries, the bloodline to run them is money, it's finance. Movement of money is extremely critical for the existence of all the industries. If finance is so important, which means banking and financial services are so important for the rest of the industries to run, why does the transformation in banking and financial services lag behind other industries? Automation is way ahead. Space technology is way ahead. Life sciences are way ahead. Pharmaceuticals are way ahead. Uh, but why not in banking and financial services institutions? That's one of the questions we pondered on and try to answer it through our approach. Anthony?
Thanks, Vishy. So let's talk about the varying differences between perception versus reality. And we'll use a hypothetical situation and kind of start diving into the root of the problem. So with any solution, the first thing you're looking to do is solve a problem immediately, right? Like what's the best thing, what's available right now at my fingertips that I could leverage to do this? Or you go out and look and do your research. So you do your research, you find a vendor, you find a tool, you get all these fancy demos, slick features, capabilities, and functionality that's really talking to you and talking directly to the problem that you're trying to solve. And it leaves you thinking that technology is the panacea and the one cure-all that's going to solve this problem for you. So then you run back, you go to your stakeholders, your business leads, and you say, guys, gals, I got a Lamborghini. I think we should get it. It's going to get us from point A to point B quicker than we could get there right now. Let's invest the money. Let's go for it. So you get approval on your project, your solution, and you go down the path of design, development, and implementation. Now it's time to lift that veil up and show everybody what you've created. You lift the veil up and you have this dusty, rusty Pinto with no motor. And you're sitting there wondering, why did this actually even happen? So one reason could be that your solution was essentially built haphazardly. The other could be that it was put on a broken process. And in fact, based on a recent survey, 65% of CXOs essentially realized that their processes were broken in March. But this isn't something new, right? Like COVID wasn't the main culprit of bringing this out. This is a long systemic problem. So as you're sitting there baffled, wondering if like there's some glimmer of hope that a requirement or functionality is there, you walk over to the front of the Pinto and you open the driver's side door, and there's this dirty raccoon rummaging through the interior of the car, throwing things all over the place. All these scraps are everywhere. And in this case, those scraps are your requirements and data because the solution was built on a broken process or just too quickly, haphazardly, and built in silos. And unfortunately, that's the reality that we're dealing with today. So staying on that reality and thinking about what's really driving it and what's causing us to develop these rusty Pintos with raccoons as pilots is the fact that, and we all know, banking and financial services is highly regulated. Literally everything we do is watched, monitored. Couple that with growing risk, the need for business continuity, changing regulations, and the fact that most firms are leaning more towards embedding technology within their solutions, ultimately results in the main driver really being, how do you mitigate risk and automate your controls? So it's fair to say that CXOs, and based on the survey, are thinking in the right direction, right? Knowing that their digital risk profile is going to grow over the next couple of years. But I think the real outlier in this is that around 85% are starting to realize that risk management's input isn't included in IT strategy, and the overall risk management plan isn't aligned to the digital strategy, which is pretty concerning, considering the push for automation and the rush to the finish line to be data superior. So with that, this is going to lead us into our first poll, which our moderator Nora will be capturing the results. And our first poll is related to, should automation initiatives be led by risk and data organizations within financial institutions? So while you all ponder on that, I'll move to the next slide to kind of talk about and continue on this journey of our current reality. So 80% of banking projects do not deliver desired results on day one. Pretty powerful statement, pretty bold prediction, and pretty high percentage. So really, like, what's going on? Like, how did we get to this point? What aren't we being told? What weren't we told when we were doing our solutioning and our implementations? And essentially, how much risk do we actually create developing or rolling out the solution? So I guess we could start with implementation. Probably the worst part of any project, right? It takes forever. Little to your knowledge, business functional and technical requirements are actually created by us. During the demos, they don't tell us that we have to do it. They just say it can be done. But sometimes we don't have the right skill set to actually create those requirements. Then you have the whole stakeholder management. Most solutions are built in silos. So when it's deployed, the person next door or a risk function or a compliance function may say, I didn't agree to that. This doesn't fit my need or my requirements. Then you have the typical salient items like licensing, the amount of resources that are required from the vendor side as well as internally. And all this put together is this huge mass undertaking and leaves you thinking how much money and how much time is being wasted on developing these solutions on processes that aren't mature, data that's not mature, and overall processes that have limited to no tacit knowledge embedded in them. So recently, banks have more or less grown in size due to mergers and acquisitions. And based on this has a major impact into strategy related to driving incremental change. And what I mean by that is that the impact to the strategy is related to the amalgamation of technology platforms, assuming that once they're combined together, they're actually going to work, where one platform may be more mature than the other, or they both may not be mature at all. Data could be everywhere. Data could potentially not be clean. And essentially, this creates this disjointed and this disparate landscape that we tend to deal with a lot today. So with any solution, you want traceability, right? Like you want to say, I know where my data is going. I know exactly what it's touching, what it's impacting, and what service could be potentially impacted if something was to happen. That's not the case. And to get to that level right now, you always need to install some type of manual workaround, just due to the fact that the landscape is disjointed. But then when you think about it, who creates the landscape? The technology organization, whether it's internal or external. And unfittingly, most cases leverage solutions on top of landscapes that have your low process maturity, low tacit knowledge, low data maturity, leveraging legacy taxonomies and multiple methodologies like Agile, Waterfall, and probably my favorite, which I see a lot when new organizations start to adopt Agile, is WAGile, where you combine Agile and Waterfall into one, which, as you can imagine, is not ideal. But with all that said, right, and the lack of view and integration on risk, that leads us to our next poll, which is, should automation initiatives be led by the risk and data organizations within financial institutions? With that said, I'll now pass it over to Vichy, who will expand more on the perception versus reality and dive deeper into identifying the truth.
Thanks, Anthony. So it's startling, right? You know, when we look at some of these data, 65% of CXOs realized that their processes were broken only when the pandemic hit them. Really, has it taken them such a long time to even realize that their processes were broken? What were they doing looking at the dashboards all this while? Well, we're going to come to that. 80% of projects do not deliver outcomes on day one, which is, again, money down the drain. Why is that happening? And approximately 70% of projects are, do not achieve their goals in itself, right? To a large extent, 70% of CXOs think that the risk dimension is going to change for the organization. It's all about risk, and why is risk not playing a significant game in driving transformation through automation within banking and financial services? This is an existential issue. The way Anthony and me are working on trying to solve this is through an approach called quantum approach. Now, uh, the way to think about it is, let's look at quantum physics and quantum mechanics in itself. It is extremely important for us to understand quantum physics and quantum mechanics to understand the vast length and breadth of the universe. But also, to understand the vast length and breadth of the universe, we need to understand the smallest particle of the universe. It's not just enough for us to understand the expanse. We need to understand how the expanse of the universe is being controlled by the smallest particles, which is obviously not the photons, neutrons, or electrons, or quarks. It is the dark matter, the Higgs boson particle. So it's important for us to understand the Higgs boson particle to understand how the universe works. Let's convert this thought process into a business. Imagine that your business is the universe. And what is the smallest particle in your universe? In your business? It is the smallest level of activities that is being conducted within the business processes in your universe, and the footprints of those smallest particles and activities is the smallest level of data that exists within your universe, which is the business. It's extremely important to understand that. So we're drawing parallels between the quantum physics principles and creating a new methodology to help and drive meaningful transformation through automation within the banking and financial services space, and it can be expanded to other industries. That is where the truth is in our mind. Now, when we look at your business as a universe, it's very important to understand that the universe is extremely linked with each other. Everything that happens within your universe is interconnected. So any solution you deploy within any part of your business is going to have significant ripple effects on the other parts of your universe, which is the other part of your business. It's important to understand this. The second one is, one needs to clearly understand the maturity level of the organization for a particular solution to be deployed. Is the business, is the universe even ready for a particular solution? While we can have technology companies and come and speak to us about the Lamborghinis and the off-the-shelf tools, and it's going to solve world hunger and blah, 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 is the business ready to adopt it? And of course, let us look at data, which is the smallest particle. One of the things which is being spoken about at large is data is going to replace cash as the king in the near future. I think it's already replaced cash as a king present. Can we go to the next slide, Anthony? So this again goes back to our famous approaches of Agile, Waterfall, Scrum, Stream, River, Ocean, whatever you may want to call it. We think these approaches are responsible for many of the challenges we have within the banking and financial services space, because it's short-sighted and has not brought in value, has not delivered value for years together that it's being deployed. They do use, when you argue with Agile consultant or somebody who's passionate about Agile, they are going to say that they do use measurement as an approach. They're going to look at technology maturity. They are going to look at the documentation of the process. Yes, but at a very superficial level. Our approach is to even measure how is measurement being viewed to drive transformation. How do you define technology maturity at the most granular level? How do you look at documentation which is real? And on top of that, we're going to add in the importance of domain expertise. Technology-driven projects lacks domain expertise to a very large extent. And the most important part of it is the tribal knowledge. It's been touched upon in a couple of instances in presentations today. The tacit knowledge or the tribal knowledge that exists at the grassroots level has to be tapped in to drive meaningful transformation and deliver real results. With all these things, we bundle it in with our quantum approach, which is basically getting in all these 5 elements. Anthony, can we get to the next page, please? If you don't mind. Thank you. We get in the top 5 foundational elements. We get to the art of measuring the effectiveness of these 5 elements while transformation is being designed. We've developed an approach where we look at data within a business process and use the approach to understand if the data is complete at the most granular level. If the data is not complete, like a string that connects the entire business end to end, then there's something wrong. The reason for understanding this, the importance of understanding this, is automation at the end of the day is algorithms. And data is going to be ingested into it and data is going to come out of it. And the way the algorithms are going to work is going to be completely dependent on the kind of data that's being ingested into it. So how do we define the completeness of data is a very, very important factor of our quantum approach. The third one, which we put in there, is extremely important. Somebody needs to be answerable to this. Till date, we do not have the technology organizations answerable to the risk propensity of any technology that's being deployed. Automation risk propensity is something that needs to be measured on an ongoing basis on every automated activity. And the activities need to be tweaked on an ongoing basis by a governing body to drive automation. And how do you define automation risk propensity is something we've developed on. And to build a progressive real roadmap with realistic timelines. It's not flip a switch and I'll come and deploy a solution and it's going to change your world. It depends on various aspects that we've spoken about in the past few pages. And how do we develop a realistic roadmap to deliver progressive transformation over a period of time? So this is a quick introduction to what Anthony and me are working on. And look out for this space. Our papers are going to be published in a couple of journals very soon. We are also going to be on several other conferences. And if you're interested in this topic and would like to hear from us, please do write to us. Thank you for this opportunity. We're open to taking questions.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Anthony, do you want to cover off this last poll that's been sent out?
Yeah, I'm trying to see how I'm able to see the results. Nor, are you able to pull those up for us?
Yes, the second poll is in progress, and I will show the results immediately soon.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Vishy, and thanks, Anthony. My apologies for not introducing you at the beginning, but fantastically.
No worries.
Interesting, and I love the raccoon example. That's going to stay with me now as an image burned in my mind. So really, really insightful. I think the concept of quantum nature is again hugely interesting. Just one brief question, actually, relating to that is when you go down to the granular level, when you go down to the quantum level, when do you know when to stop? Because you kind of could go in even further and even further and even further, which obviously can elongate your process a little bit. Is there a point that you realize you've got the granular level you're after, or how does that work? Just briefly, if you can.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, Ian. In fact, we pondered on it for quite some time, but there is a realistic endpoint, and when you look at what we look at is the scope of automation in itself. Okay, so what are we automating, and what is the smallest level that particular activity can be decomposed into? And that is the level we would like to get the data from, right? There are certain activities, for instance, there's somebody who's sending me an email asking me to pull data from a particular system and deliver it to them for them to do a particular test, right? Now, that's a L1 level process, but getting email, getting those information, what comes in that email, what kind of data that needs to be pulled from which system, and how do I pull it, and for what date range, and then pull that data effectively and deliver it. So to what level can I decompose that process? Would be the logical end to which we need to get to understanding data. Does that make sense, Ian?
It does. It does. Perfect. Really, really interesting. Great new concept. Fascinating stuff. Well done, guys. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on now to Niraj Supram, Global Cloud Strategy Leader at IBM. He's going to take us through transforming in adversity with cloud growth. Niraj is a global business leader in the field of management consulting, advisory services, hybrid cloud, and digital transformation. So yet another expert panelist for you to listen to. So Niraj, over to you.
Thanks, Ian. And that was a very interesting topic by Vish and Anthony. I'm totally hooked. So I'm going to look forward to your journals. Thanks, guys. And quick introduction, I've been doing this work for over 22 years in the strategy consulting space, or CIO advisory, however you want to call it. The part that kind of gets me excited always is the fact that I can talk to these guys and help define the problem and then solve the problem, right? I think that's what makes it unique. So today I'm going to share some experiences from those conversations that I've had and bring about some of the industry imperatives that we are seeing as we move into the new normal. And also, what are the strategies that customers as well as clients that we work with are doing as they move into the 2021 new normal? Because we thought 2020 would be the end of it, but guess what? We've got some more, headwind that we have to get through. And I want to share a couple of examples that cater to your understanding as well. In terms of the business angle of how things are going in the new direction that we are seeing, these are the key areas that most of the changes occurred in. Workforce, as all of us know, has been a huge shift in terms of how people are managed. Most of the companies had to come up with some back to work plans as well as remote working plans in those kind of areas. We've seen customer engagement taking a huge U-turn in terms of how we are doing this. So for example, these conferences, customer meets, we had unique visits for customers that we used to do. Most of that has changed, which means the CMO now has to completely rethink how they work with their customers. Remote access, I think, is pretty self-explanatory in terms of how we see customers and employees of companies needing support in doing their day-to-day business, as well as being able to cater to their end customers as well. Cybersecurity has been a major focus area for most of the clients that we're working with, primarily because I think in the advent of the change that we have seen, there is a huge uptick in the number of security incidents that have happened. I think all of you have been going through a lot of the news items that have come on this topic, and I think that's a major area of focus. I was talking to some broadcasting CTO this week, and he was like, this is one of our biggest focus areas as we go into 2021. Supply chain has also been a major focus area for businesses because they had to relook at some of their tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, how they're working with them, and also look at optimization of cost in the given scenarios that we've seen. And last but not the least, healthcare providers have had to rethink their approach to how they address the spike in usage of portals or usage of video-based systems for doing things. And in all of these, there's one common factor, and that is cloud. And that's what I kind of want to switch gears and take a pivot into from a technology angle for now. So if you look at the OPEX, CAPEX challenges that has happened, or the shift that has happened in the customer thinking, you can put them into two broad categories. One, I would say, is the operating model approach, where how they operate has changed from a CAPEX to OPEX model. And similarly, from how they do their infrastructure and architecture work has changed in a big way. From an operating model perspective, as you can see, when something would happen like a disaster or a phishing attack or something like that, there was a lot of manual intervention involved. And I think the direction now is to go into an automated response model. Most of the teams had clear-cut demarcations and standard operating procedures on how they would do their stuff in a siloed way. Now it's a completely collaboration-based model. Similarly, when businesses started responding to how they manage their customers and stay engaged with their customers, we saw a lot of retail companies seeing a huge jump in the usage of their websites and could not scale as fast as they could have or they needed to because of the change in their structural setup or the architectural constraints that they built into the model. And last but not the least, I think I want to harp on open systems. Open systems have become a new realization for customers because the lock-in that is involved with many of these platforms that they buy has kind of limited them on growing or expanding in scale, right? So that's been what has been the IT side of things, if you want to look at it that way. So what were the strategies that customers applied as they got into this new direction? I've got 8 boxes here just to kind of give you a big picture view on how this works. I worked with Forbes Insights earlier last year. We came out with an actual detailed CIO study on what's the approach to handle their IT transformation as we go into 2020. And some of these are touched upon there as well. Cloud scaling is pretty straightforward. What we've seen Cloud help do is for customers who've had a predefined data center-based model, they've been able to really scale fast into the cloud for the burst or the extended capacity that they saw. This is commonly seen, especially with the likes of healthcare providers or retail customers and so on, right? Disaster recovery has been another area when customers were hit with phishing attacks or compromised data, then they had to roll back to the previous versions. That's been an area where cloud has been a huge help because it helped reduce their costs in a way, plus also operationalize with automation. SaaS integration, I think as it alludes to, most of us know that companies have their CRM systems, they have systems that they use for procurement and so on. And as customers started moving into a new working model, a lot of those data points had to be integrated in a way that it could make sense for whether it is accounting or analytics and things like that. So SaaS integration was an area where we saw cloud play a big role. And extending legacy is commonly seen, especially with transportation style companies where most of their IT is in legacy, but the extension of that into mobile apps or online portals and things like that has been something that cloud has helped accelerate in a big way. Some of the models that you see there for hybrid DevOps and composite multi-cloud are referencing microservices-based architectures, as well as building on the public cloud and then hosting the production workloads onto your private clouds. This is something that we see in the financial services sector, like Vish was talking about, as well as in the healthcare space, where there's a lot of PII data, personally identifiable data that needs to be protected. Optimization is alluding to cloud becoming an enabler for reducing total capital costs and moving into an OPEX model. That is something that has been a major beneficiary. And edge computing. All of us have heard the terms IoT, have heard of machine learning and things like that, but some of the applications of those come in the case of edge computing with cloud. So I'll give you an example. Some of the ports in Europe have been enabled with cloud-enabled edge computing models, where when a ship pulls in, there are specific triggers that happen. There's a tracking at a granular level on what the activities are that are happening, and they kick off and trigger following workflows that are required. So cloud has been kind of a enabler of multiple layers of sophistication, simplification, and in some cases, cost reduction and optimization as well. So we see that cloud in the context of this new normal is going to be the big driver for change. And most of the IT organizations and businesses have come to realize this and are doing the needful to ensure that is executed on. So I want to share with you a couple of examples that we are working with industry leaders on. One is, this is a publicly available article that you can read. And this is our CEO, Arvind Krishna, with the Chief Digital Officer for Anthem, Rajiv. And one of the points that you'll note that I've underlined on the top is most of the companies are trying to address the customer's expectations. And what the pandemic has led us to understand and realize is we all haven't been as adaptive or as ready for something this big. And that's what the partnership that was announced with Anthem and IBM was trying to help focus. And there's a lot of thought process put in terms of how hybrid cloud as a strategy is something that will need to enable large transformations and change. So for example, if you look at a typical IT model that you have for any business, they either have everything on the cloud, if it's a fairly new company in the last 5-10 years that's been set up, or if it's a larger enterprise customer, we see a combination of their data center based models plus pockets of applications that are in the cloud. So what the hybrid cloud model helps define for these customers is move the right workloads to the cloud. It's not the intent to move everything to the cloud, right? So I have a common saying that I bring about when I talk to customers: cloud is for everyone, but not everything is for the cloud. It's very important to understand this because when I meet some customers, they say, oh, are you expecting us to move everything to the cloud? My answer is no. You will always have a part of your total footprint which is going to stay on-prem. In each industry, it changes. For some industries, it could be 15% that would stay back. For some highly regulated industries, it could be even up to 40% that may not move to the cloud. So it depends is the right answer, but nonetheless, we've got the understanding on the different industries and the nature of work that happens there, which will be translated as you start going into a transformative journey. But I just wanted to bring this up as an example of what the realization is in the marketplace of the importance of change and how the shortcomings that have been identified are starting to work in the favor of the businesses as well. Here's a second example that I want to share. A large airline company that we're working with. This is a resiliency example. And the reason I chose a resiliency example is because I think today, more than ever, the importance of the business being available to the end customers is very important. And that's where I think resiliency enabled by cloud is the critical success factor. As you can see here, we've been able to bring down their recovery time objectives by 60%. And the number of applications that we are running there is about 500 of them, which are completely orchestrated. I want to draw your attention to this construct of orchestration. When you are hit with, let's say, a cyber attack, or if you're hit with a flood in a location which is coastal, what typically happens is there is a operational procedure that every company's CIO, CTO has in place. And as part of that, there are recovery procedures that are called out. Part of the issues we've seen with most of the customers is that many of these are hard to follow or they're hard to implement. And that's where we see orchestration of recovery as a critical success factor. And part of the work that we do with many of our clients is to bring about that realization on making it a completely automated process down to the point of, I want to bring up A, B, C, F, G, H applications, and that is the application that I want to take forward. So that's the granularity that we can enable for customers. And doing this will help you in two ways. One is definitely increasing the certainty of your business. And the second one is definitely related to the reduction of cost in the bigger picture of view. So I want to leave you guys with these two examples. There's a lot of body of work that is related to this on my LinkedIn profile. You can see most of my posts. There's information related to this as well as the work that we do. And I'm happy to connect with you all after the fact if you need to, and we can take this conversation further. Some of the business points I have called out are something we could go on for days. But given that this is a quick preview and the tip of the iceberg kind of a conversation, I wanted to leave you with some of these key shifts that we are seeing in the industry. And we'll hand it over to Ian and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Niraj. Again, you know, like the content we've seen today, sort of hugely insightful, interesting. Some of the concepts that you were sharing were probably new to me, but absolutely, I got it. One thing that sort of occurred to me was, I guess, that concept of orchestration that you were talking at the end. You know, when organizations go into crisis mode, do you find that they tend not to be structured in thinking? They tend not to follow sort of plans. It's reactive in terms of its nature. And does that influence decisions that then made? And therefore is the orchestration piece, you know, an enabler to actually sort of almost sit back and kind of manage that, you know, constructively?
That's true, Ian. I think most of us have heard of the human error aspect of it, right? And what the orchestration helps you do is, when you're at a clear state of mind and understand the business imperatives that you have promised, you start there and make sure you're able to deliver to those promises. Because at the end of the day, the business is the consumer within a company. IT is just an enabler. And what the IT teams are helping the business do is, tell us what you want. We will bring it to the point of your satisfaction without any errors or uncertainty. And I think that's what these orchestration models help you with.
Fantastic. And certainly, as you reflected on sort of the time that we're going through at the moment, most organizations have faced that challenge. So terrific. So do follow up with Niraj on his profile, as he mentioned, should you wish. So moving on, we next have Alexandra Uriarte. She is a senior manager in Agile Business and Workforce Transformation Lead at Carrier. She's a consultant, got global experience in consultancy. Her own background and experience is in policy development and staff development, consulted in a number of topics. But today she's going to be talking to us in terms of the session that we've got on a growth mindset. So hopefully, are you there, Alexandra?
Hello, yes, I am. I would normally flip on my camera, but I'm afraid that I have ran into a pickle just as we were starting our conference. My building went off on fire alarms, and I live on the 39th floor of my building. So I had to scramble and find a Wi-Fi, and so I've had to get inventive with my setup. So if you don't mind, I'll keep my camera off.
Did you embrace the orchestration mode in terms of handling that crisis?
Yes. We had to adapt quite quickly. But I'm delighted and very honored to be here and on a panel of such distinguished professionals in the field. So thank you once again. I'll start to share my screen.
Thank you.
All right. So as Ian mentioned, I'll be talking mostly about the growth mindset, somewhat in the context of what it means to shift from cost reduction into a growth mindset. But I did want to elaborate a little bit more on myself. Yeah, as Ian mentioned, I'm a senior manager at the Carrier Corporation, formerly Visa, and at Scrum Inc. I began my career in agile business at Scrum Inc. under the leadership of Dr. Jeff Sutherland, who is, as many of you know, one of the co-creators of the Scrum framework and a signer of the Agile Manifesto. From my work with him, I did have the opportunity to travel the world and apply Scrum and Agile practices in a variety of contexts, different cultures, certainly different languages, and that sort of built my portfolio that drove me to where I am at Carrier, which is driving our own agile transformation from the digital space. Prior to that, in another life, I am a recovering public policy and political advisor. I worked a lot in data-driven nonprofits. I was an advisor to some members of Congress and several White House officials during the Obama years, and then had the pleasure to take those advisory skill sets and team building skill sets into the consulting world. So now I'm a master's candidate in organizational psychology at Harvard. Hopefully that helps to expand a little bit more on my pursuit to bring agile thinking and cultural transformation to the workplace. So first, let's start about cost reduction. These are some statistics from Deloitte that basically say that 71% of businesses are planning cost reduction initiatives over the next 2 years. And I think that statistic is back in 2017 or 2018. I would wager that about 100% of businesses these days are planning to undertake cost reduction initiatives over these next 2 to 5, maybe even the next 10 years. And why is that? The world is changing at a rapid pace. Global catastrophes such as the one that we're currently in are harder and harder to predict. But what does it mean for us as leaders, as team players, as agents of change when it comes to not just saving the business money, but saving our business and our customers and our colleagues time and stress? In my experience, often cost-cutting reduction can be deliberative, can be data-driven, but the ones that I have seen, particularly in the context of what we're going to call agile transformations, are sort of near-term choices, near-term decisions that save a little bit on the bottom line right now, that end up becoming more expensive over time. And so when I'm discussing growth mindset, I want us to keep in the back of our minds that particular type of cost reduction. The decisions that we're making right now in the near term that are costing us or that are going to cost us over the long term. And so where do we reduce costs in a pinch? We'll find ways to eliminate waste in our system. We'll find ways to coordinate and align our processes. We'll modernize and upgrade. We'll maybe cut services. We will change our partners. We will renegotiate contracts. These are all ways to reduce costs, certainly in a pinch. But one of the areas I've seen cost cutting specifically is in the personal and professional development realms. Surely many of you have experienced in your own businesses, certain benefits are taken away, budget or line item is removed that might have been offered to you to increase your skill set, get a certification, something, even go to school. So this is one of those cost cutting efforts that I see that I think, I truly believe in my heart, is only more expensive over time. And what does the future sort of hold for us? According to McKinsey, 14% of the global workforce will have to switch occupations or acquire new skills in 2020, or rather in 2030. And that's going to be due to a lot of things, but specifically, as some of you have mentioned, due to the advancements in automation and specifically in artificial intelligence. 87% of executives and leaders are experiencing skills gaps or are going to have them over time. I believe that number will be even greater, especially as we see more of a need for safety in the workplace, more of a need for automation and predictability, and as we increase our capabilities in data and analytics. So I have this theory of job security, but not role security. If we're going to compete with AI, if we're going to fill in skills gaps, and if we're going to keep an eye on modernizing ourselves, our people, our workforce needs to be sure that the changes that they're going to have to endure are safe for them to make. So this is something else that I also found from McKinsey. It's a model to expand, develop, strengthen, and build. And it is one framework with which to view the way that a growth mindset should take on. Expand the ability to operate in a fully digital environment. That is one key theme that at least McKinsey claims, and that I certainly feel is going to be required to make our workforce successful. And then there's this develop piece, and this is where I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper later into my presentation. We need to start developing the cognitive skills of our workforce so that there is more complex thinking in the environment that is rapidly changing. We are currently in a workforce that is perhaps a bit outdated, or that needs a little bit more re-engineering in order to meet today's demands. We need to strengthen social and emotional skills to ensure effective collaboration. That does not happen overnight, and it is not a technical challenge. It is an adaptive challenge. What do I mean when I say technical versus adaptive challenges? Oftentimes when we're talking about our digital transformations and our cultural transformations, we are talking about adaptive challenges as if they were technical challenges, and they are in fact not. Suddenly, we have these new words and these new ideas: agile transformation, Kanban, Scrum, failing fast. All of these words and concepts come into the workspace, but they're not immediately adopted, because it's not like downloading software into our consciousness and suddenly we are brand new things. There's no such thing as human 2.0. There is only the adaptive steps that we take little by little, and we have to enable our people to take them. I'll talk more about that later here in the deck. Now, finally, we have to building that adaptability and resilience to drive during evolving business situation. I also mean a worldly, global situation. I mean this every day in our normal lives and in our business lives. Leveraging flexibility in the way that we think about the world and how we perceive our working environment is going to be critical. And the more flexible we are, the better we are at reacting in real time rather than when it is too late. So keep in mind this notion of job security and not role security as we talk about what growth mindset is, and what really I'm gonna just call it a learning mindset. So here's the how. So defining growth mindset comes from the original works of Carol Dweck. I'm sure many of you are aware of her work. Dr. Dweck, she's the one who originally coined the phrase. But a growth mindset is one in which an individual believes that their talent and their intelligence can be developed further with their own effort. That's a crucial piece of it, but with organizational support. And there's a lot of study going into what it means to have organizational support. We can certainly discuss that a little bit later as well. But all people are a mix of both growth and fixed mindsets. It always depends on context and experience. Lots of folks will pull out personality tests and intelligence tests and use that as benchmarks for things like hiring and team building. But the truth is that we are all a little bit of everything that we see on these personality intelligence tests, these metrics, and certainly when it comes to both growth and fixed mindsets. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that growth and fixed mindsets do scale. That is what we call culture sometimes. So if we've got a large group of people who have growth mindset and who share that, that will naturally and can naturally spread across a team. Harder at an enterprise level, there are certainly qualities and techniques that can be hired for and that can be cultivated, but to have a whole enterprise growth mindset is really difficult to achieve. But there's a framework here I'm about to propose to you all, or to introduce to you all, that might help in that endeavor. Finally, at its core, cultivating a growth or a learning mindset requires risk-taking and room to experiment. Now, surely you've heard this before when talking about growth mindset. Growth mindset is about celebrating failure and recognizing people for taking the risk. It is not simply about that. There is a big missing piece of the puzzle. And I tend to speak quite quickly. If I need to slow down, by all means, please let me know. So in a growth mindset company, what you'll often find is that 40% of your workforce is likelier to say that their colleagues are trustworthy. And as I think we can all agree, trust is one of the major features of a productive team and is required for collaboration and great innovation to take place. 34% of your workforce is more likely to feel a stronger sense of ownership and commitment to the company. Now, that's a key feature in motivating humans. Humans like to feel some degree of autonomy and mastery over their work. And in a growth mindset enterprise, this is likely to lead to those feelings. 65% are likelier to stay at the company that supports its risk taking. If I feel safe to make a mistake in my workplace, I'm less likely to leave that place for some other business that may not value that, who may want me to stay in my lane, so to speak, or who is more interested in making sure that I am not making waves. Companies that support creative risk taking and visibility of that risk taking far stronger than its competitors. 49% are likely to stay at the company that supports innovation. And I would argue that most companies today are leaning into this notion of innovation rather than staying still. If you're not innovating, then I would say that your business model is likely to age out, because innovation is what's driving us forward and faster every single day. So scaling the growth mindset, here's what's going into that. About $356 billion are spent on leadership and mindset development every year, and yet 75% are of at least 329 surveyed organizations describe those efforts as ineffective. This comes from a Deloitte survey that was done, I believe, within the last year. And what does it say? That 75% of 329 major organizations describe efforts to cultivate leadership and mindset development as ineffective. What could $356 billion of investment go towards that would be effective? That is not a small bit of money, and it is quite a sunk cost to be dragging along in our businesses. What we're missing to make not just effective our development efforts, but the improved cognitive and behavioral complexity that modern demands require. What would make such an investment more worthwhile? I would wager that these three themes, which I've directly pulled from the pillars of Scrum, transparency, inspection, and adaptation, are all three things that are missing in ordinary or average leadership and mindset development efforts. They tell you why mindset change is important. They will show you, some case studies of organizations that have seemed to make it work, but they don't emphasize that these three things need to be in place to make it happen. So what do we need to make transparent? We need to make transparent that there are areas in the business that are failing. We need to make sure that people can see with their eyes and not just in their own heads that that there are things that are not going well, and that we have an intention to change. Writing that intention out and making it visible for all to see, I would think is an extremely valuable exercise. Creating time to inspect that, not just that intention, but also the behaviors and the challenges that are getting in the way of making that intention actualized. What do we do that gets in the way of this intention from making it real? And then finally, adaptation. What are we going to do about it? Gathering insights on those habits and those commitments and those assumptions, leveraging and then recognizing that there are things that we want and there are things that we are inherently doing that get in our way. That is one big piece of this puzzle. And so making things visible, inspecting and adapting, just like the Agile pillars tell us to do when it comes to expanding a growth mindset, is crucial here. Now, I've brought this framework out from Dr. Robert Doctors Robert Kagan and Lisa Leahy, they were doing this work around the same time that Carol Dweck did. In fact, the book that I've used to kind of seed the foundation for this presentation comes from their book called Immunity to Change. It came out about 2 years after Carol Dweck's book Mindset came out. And I think this model not only uses these agile pillars to further their framework, I think the framework itself, which I'll elaborate on here in a moment, gives us a practical practical how to. Often people say, how do I do this? Yes, I know that this works. Yes, I know I've seen the case studies. Yes, I've seen the improvements, but I just don't know how to do it. So the X-ray model proposed in Immunity to Change makes visible the improvement goals, counter behaviors, and above all, the hidden commitments and big assumptions that we as individuals have, and that we in our teams have, and we as businesses have. It also allows for the inspection of those 4 teams when you can make time to visit them regularly. And this model creates a mode to adapt that behavior through increasing the complex thinking and experimentation. So here's a quick visual about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Once again, this is Carol Dweck, and we all of us have a fixed mindset in something, and we all have a growth mindset in other things. It's about how we feel. Now, a fixed mindset relies on the premise that intelligence is static, that cognitive development stops really after adolescence, that we all remain kind of in the same plateau after a certain age and once we've had enough experiences to remain comfortable. But the growth mindset challenges that, it embraces those changes, and it persists in the face of setbacks and advances with feedback. It is willing to endure worthy struggle, worthy pain in a day-to-day setting, in a complex setting, and certainly in a business setting. So the immunity to change model builds upon and complements this theory here. Here's what an X-ray model looks like. The step 1 here, it asks you to define one big thing from a list of goals. It wants you to set a bunch of intentions that you would like to change. The second step here will ask you, what are you doing instead of those improvement goals? How are you getting in the way of these intentions? And then this step 3 is, what are the competing hidden commitments that I'm silently kind of hanging on to? I'm sure all of us have struggled, let's say, with a New Year's resolution. As an example, for me, one of my intentions for this year might be that I want to get up and exercise every single day for an hour. The counter behaviors to that might be, well, I don't set my alarm. I haven't really found a trainer that I'd like to work with. I don't have a gym membership. And I also don't do anything to eat healthy that might also motivate me. Now, in engaging in these negative behaviors towards my intentions, I'm actually keeping a hidden commitment to myself. I also happen to value sleeping in. I also happen to value being comfortable. I don't like to sweat very much. So I will, in essence, get in my own way and change overall growth, learning. It is not about deciding suddenly that you have an intention and wishing overnight that you're going to change because you have a list of ways to get better. It is about the adaptive changes, about the adaptive changes, and it is the overall challenge to overcome the hidden commitments that we have based on the assumptions. The assumption overall is, I don't want to exercise because I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt myself, or I'm afraid that it's going to be too much work and I'm not going to see any results. So what is the challenge here? Make room to experiment and challenge the big assumption. If the big assumption is that I'm not going to see results after putting in a lot of hard work of exercising every single morning, well, how about give myself a time frame, let's say 2 months or even 1 week, to experiment and engage in the behaviors that I think are going to get me to where I am, and then reassess. according to Kagan and Leahy, this is the only way to actually not only build more momentum and motivation for an individual to change, it actually also works with teams who engage in these conversations, perhaps in the context of a sprint retrospective. I have used this X-ray model on teams, and slowly but surely, they've developed better and better continuous improvement experience. They've developed better and better Kaizens, and they've lasted over the course of time. And what they will do instead of just identifying a random automation Kaizen within the sprint, they will focus and dedicate themselves on a big assumption that the team has that is getting in the way of their sprint to sprint work, and that is ultimately not making them happier or more productive. Challenging the big assumption and shining a light on those big assumptions is ultimately the main lever in creating growth and change. And then aligning on those behaviors. Once you can remove that anxiety and the grief and the fear that comes inherent in our hidden and competing commitments and that are seeded by these big assumptions, that is where the real change actually happens. So, connecting the dots here a little bit more, Kagan and Leahy, advanced the knowledge of adult development in an era where it was sort of taken for granted that adults after their mid-20s really don't increase much more in cognitive development or cognitive complexity rather. They do say wisdom comes with age, and that may be true. However, according to Leahy and Kagan, we can develop even more complexity of thought and certainly tolerance for contradictions, as well as different belief systems and approaches to challenges when we enable ourselves to look inward, challenge ourselves, and then experiment out in the world to try and overcome those assumptions and those challenges. In essence, intelligence can be developed and can be advanced. The one main drawback is this is not easy, and it does not happen overnight, and it is occasionally even painstaking, but the results are often worth the effort. And the reason why this is also important, why are we talking about a growth mindset to begin with? It is because there's a rapid and truly overwhelming change in today's work environment. It requires people participating in the workforce to possess what Kagan and Leahy call self-authoring minds, and that leaders possess what they call self-transforming minds. Currently, the theory is we work in a space where most people are just operating on socialized minds. Now, this is what that looks like in a graph. Socialized minds are characterized by team players, faithful followers, they align, they seek direction, and they're often reliant on others. And it takes a lot to get from a socialized mind to a self-authoring mind. You'll see that this line squiggles a bit up and down. The thicker the line, the more presence in a population that there is of this type of mind. The more complex thinking, as time passes, the more complex our thinking becomes, we start to become self-authoring minds. And that is characterized by people who are agenda-driven, who are problem solving, who tend to be independent, but also can be collaborative. And then there's a greater emphasis on leaders learning to lead, having one's own compass and frame. Fewer and fewer actually do make it to this stage of self-authoring. It takes a lot of pressure. It takes a lot of experience to transcend from a socialized mind to a self-authoring mind, and an even greater degree of experience and effort and thinking to get to a self-transforming mind. And that is characterized by being a meta leader, someone who has a big picture vision, who is multi-perspective, who has many contradictions, who can be problem finding, also problem solving, and interdependent, right? And we need more people in the self-transforming mind at the leadership stage. So how?
Sandra, I have to just sort of cut in. I just in the interest of time, with
sorry, yes,
a little bit short. No. It's a fascinating subject, really interesting and stimulating in terms of thought process. But I wonder if you can just sort of briefly, very, very briefly, just maybe wrap up
Yes, thank you for keeping me accountable to that. And I'm very eager to hear our following speaker. So you know what, I'm going to leave it here. I think I've belabored the point. And ultimately, in conclusion, we're shifting from growth mindset. It's about increasing behavioral complexity and giving our workforce room to improve through experimentation and risk taking. So I apologize, Gene.
Fantastic. No.
No worries.
Engaging subject. So thank you for taking time. So we don't have any time for questions with Alexandra, but without sort of hesitation, I'll now sort of move on to hand over to Jean Dahl. Jean's a practice lead. We're hugely privileged to have her join us. She's CEO of advisory, strategy and large scale transformation within Deloitte. Is an enterprise lean, agile leader and transformational change agent, over 25 years of experience of transforming organizations, thought leader, writer, speaker in lean, agile and scaled agile. And with that, over to you, Jean, who's going to talk to us about organizational transformation, probably the most important subject of the moment, but from a holistic approach. Over to you, Jean.
Thank you so much, Ian, and no problem, Alexandra. You've referenced Deloitte at least twice, maybe 3 times. So all good. So, well, hello and everybody. I am very excited to come speak to you and very appreciative of being asked to speak. And so today's going to be on a topic of special interest to me, holistic organizational approach to transformation. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, given that most organizations do not approach transformation, whatever kind of transformation you're talking about, from a holistic perspective, because that perspective is really not understood. So what I'm going to try to leave you with, being the last speaker of the day, is kind of trying to pull everybody and wrap everybody together on the different topics that we've talked about, which, you know, in the long run will be very important as you go forward and try to digest and then implement some of the great ideas you heard today. So with that said, just a little bit of, and Ian did an excellent job, so I'm not going to add much to that. This is kind of a paint by numbers or picture type of representation of me. My latest accomplishment is really over here that I wanted to touch on. I have written a couple of books, but my latest one is on leading lean. So I specialize in lean, agile, and DevOps transformations for the most part is what I do. And so leadership was the concentration in my organizational psychology work at the MBA level at UT. So very excited there. We have something in common again, Alexandra. So, but the bottom line here is that, you know, this is me in picture, so I'm not going to go much farther into it. I am giving you my email address if you feel free to reach out, ask questions. If you've got a comment or something, you know, wanted to talk to me about something I speak about, please feel free to use that email address. I can also be reached on LinkedIn. All right, so let's get into it. So really what we're talking about when we're talking about transformation is really responding to change. And that is the crux of transformation and especially agility, because I look at agility, which is lean, which is agile, which is DevOps, which is any type of capability that enables your organization to respond rapidly to change. And so I take a little bit bigger umbrella in looking at all of this, and I call it enterprise agility, because it truly is the ability of the entire organization to effectively respond to any type of change, both internal and external, no matter where it comes from. Because really, what I learned very early on in my career was that with change comes opportunity. So change should actually be looked upon in a positive light. And when you think about transformation, it's really 3-dimensional. And this is where a lot of change agents get into problems. And I think your speakers today have really focused on each one of these areas, and that's from people, process, and technology. You have to hit on all cylinders and address all 3 of those things to come at transformation from a holistic perspective, from that enterprise perspective, because you just can't look at technology, which of course is the technologist's way to transform, which is much needed, or maybe the lean person, the Lean Six Sigma or the modern lean person looking at it from a process perspective, or even from a people perspective, which don't underestimate culture as a major transformational pivot. And I think that was a little bit of what Alexandria was talking about, is that learning mindset. That is very important because that is the key to continuous improvement. And so when you think about it, I have a lot of organizations that come to me and they're somewhere in, this piece of it, they're thinking tactically, and maybe they've scaled their agile organization and, their development organization. And then they're thinking, well, why aren't I getting all of my bang for my buck? It's because they really haven't tied their teams to their strategy. And you have to look at this degree of agility as you move up through this, as you create a holistic enterprise. And so if you really want to create lasting change and you want to be effective at embracing agility, being able to respond to change, you're going to have to move up this diagonal line in your organization. Because a lot of times it does start at the team level, then it moves more into the middle tactical levels where we're talking about specific solutions, and then maybe we bundle things into products, and then finally we get up to the enterprise. So this is the usual transformation path, especially when you're talking about agile. Agile is an organic growth, has an organic growth factor, and it starts at the team level. Then there's something that happens up here at the enterprise level that requires the organization to think in shorter spans, in shorter time periods, in a different type of operating model that makes senior leadership believe that the responding to agility and being able to respond to change becomes incredibly important. And it kind of meets in this middle section, in this tactical section. And so if you're sitting in the middle part of an organization, you can make a major impact on your transformation if you just understand what the teams need and what the senior leaders need, and then meet that need in the middle. So when you look at how effective organizations are, I always ask this. When I go into an engagement with a client, are you effectively responding to and capitalizing on change? That's really the name of the game. That's why we have transformation. That's why the word is even used. It's interesting. I've just had a couple of conversations this week actually about that word, in that, will it exist beyond the next 3 to 5 years? Is it outlasting its welcomeness? Has it outlasted its welcome? And will we be calling this something different? If I had to pick a different term, I would call it enterprise agility and embracing that agility. So think about this, from these questions down in the black are for you to think about it from this presentation. Do you really understand how your organization is currently responding to change? And are you capitalizing on the ability to take the opportunities that it creates and create value for your stakeholders, your customers, your shareholders, your employees, your end users, whoever that is? Because that's really the name of the game when you're thinking about enterprise agility. And on that note, I have actually put together an alternative to some of the business agility frameworks that are out there, because I don't actually believe in just talking about technical agility or business agility. Those are components to an enterprise that's after embracing agility. And so when you think about this, that 3-dimensional chart can now be turned into this little wheel of 5 different discrete but connected areas that spin in an organization. It's like what are those widget spinners or whatever you call it? I have one on my desk that kind of looks like this, but it's only 4 instead of 5. But anyway, if you held this up from a physical perspective and you spun it, this would have to spin holistically around and around and around for the organization to be in balance. And so when you think about it, it really all starts with that strategy, strategic agility. Can you plan in both short iterations as well as longer time frames? It's a fallacy that people think that agile organizations don't plan. They actually plan 2 or 3 times more, and more people are involved in the planning process than any other type of organization. So strategy is very important. Both the short term, the midterm, and the long term all need to be set. Then number 2, there needs to be the right operating model. You need to have operating agility. You need to make sure that you've got the right operating model. A lot of organizations are suffering under the weight of 20th century operating models. They're looking at servicing only one part of a community or a value community or possibly a network that they're serving, and they're not looking downstream and upstream and up and down for value and disruption. So you have to have an operating model that enables agility and it allows you to move quickly. And then business agility is the business. What does the business need to create? How do they need to ideate? How do they need to interact with their customers, their stakeholders, their shareholders, and so forth to create products and services that are meaningful? And as I always say, the right product at the right time, creating the right value for the right people is what agility is about. And then technical is all of the stuff that we were talking about a little while ago with Mirage, the cloud, and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm sorry, I really didn't catch the first couple of speakers. I got caught by a client, but I'm sure they were talking about some of this with the technology and the business. And of course, you've got to enable, you've got to adapt with the disruptive technologies that come out. You've also got to be good at the blocking and tackling, and that's basically implementing Agile and understanding Agile. And that is the development processes of the future. Short iterative cycles. It doesn't matter if you call it Agile. It doesn't matter if you call it agility. It's about iterative and incremental design and development that changes and can be impacted quickly by those changes, and you can change your direction in your technical prowess as well. And lastly, and probably most importantly, is cultural agility, the ability to get a whole group of people moving together and moving forward. And it's contrary to popular belief. Chapter 8 in my book talks all about creating a culture of agility. And it's based in common objectives and values and beliefs and ethics. I was just talking to a client this morning about that. They wanted to change their culture, but they were a little hand-strapped or hand-tied as to how to do that. And there was a lot of hand-wringing about the fact that they were losing people, and there was a revolving door on their front door, and their street cred was going down. And how do they change that? It's through the values and the morals and the ethics and the beliefs that come from the top, and that are set through strategic objectives and key results, and then are monitored through a series of collaboration, feedback, and recognition. And if that sounds like measuring what matters, you're exactly right. That's a book. If you haven't read it, I would strongly recommend that. So, does your organization really strive to achieve enterprise-wide agility, or are they stuck in a 20th century operating model? Do they have a culture that wants and yearns for, mastery, autonomy, and purpose, as Alexandria was talking about? That's Daniel Pink's book, Drive. You have to understand what motivates your workforce and then put all of these things together to create that center value. And so are you achieving and are you striving for enterprise-wide agility? That's what the framework is about. So if you look at thinking, or if you think about this, I talked about Agile. Now, when you move to creating fast, flexible flow throughout an organization, you're actually thinking in terms of lean. And so this is the model that you would want to try to build out in your organization to make sure that you are embracing fast, flexible flow. There needs to be some sort of group at the top that sets strategy. I call that portfolio. That's the portfolio piece, either at an enterprise or a business unit level. That's the ideas that understands how to refine those things and then gains alignment at the top. And those items end up on a portfolio backlog that then becomes the guiding force, the strategic portfolio roadmap for the whole business unit or even for the whole organization. And then that moves down into then the execution layer, which is the products and the teams, and that becomes a process of refining those big outcomes, those epics that you're looking for, and the feature elaboration. So you triage those features and you understand what's being asked, then you move it through refinement and you align across that whole product backlog, and then it drops to the teams. So my previous statement about planning, I think you can start to see that Agile organizations actually plan more than traditional organizations, because at a traditional level, you might do the portfolio stuff, but then you hand it over to a project or program manager, and that's the person that creates the giant plan. And I did that myself in my early part of my career. But the thing about it is that as soon as it meets contact with either the customer or your teams, the whole thing starts to slide sideways. So it's an illusion. It's a perception of being in charge and, and living large and being in control of change. It's an illusion. So the way Lean and Agile addresses that is we break these things down into quarterly and yearly or 18-month types of roadmaps, and then we iterate and refine over and over again in these two layers. Then by the time the information gets to the team and the team actually puts that on release planning, and then they do sprint planning, and then they're up and running with sprinting, with Scrum, they understand very specifically what's being asked of them. And they can change anything on a dime because they understand that strategic portfolio roadmap above, and also the release plan, the MVP release plan that everyone is marching towards for that quarter. Because it's either 2 to 4 week sprints and a 3-month release planning window. If you're using SAFe, you call that your program increment. So you're planning in smaller cycles, but you're planning more often, but you're planning for a shorter period of time. Because by the time the team gets the work, they should be able to make 80 to 85% of the decisions, the right decisions, without having to run this back up to somebody at the top, which is less informed and has less information and really doesn't know the situation, only gets the version of the person bringing them the problem. They make a decision and then that's carried back down through the organization. That's traditional Tayloristic thinking that does not work in a 21st century organization. And those are some of the things that I talk about in my book. If you're interested in learning more, there's a framework in there that's very close to what you saw. What you see in this presentation is kind of the next iteration of what was in my book, and that was just a year ago. So you can see how things change so rapidly. Why would you be stuck in a 20th century Tayloristic mindset and be thinking that you're going to plan for 3 years out? It just is, it's crazy talk. But anyway, you get the idea that this is a iterative process then too, because then this information comes back up and it informs the next planning cycle. So this is really the key to creating a lean, agile organization in the 21st century and embracing enterprise agility. And this is what I was talking about who's enabled to do what and how does that work. And I think I pretty much touched on this as far as by the time the decisions get down into the product owners and the teams, they're well capable of making their own decisions and guiding the organization from the bottom up. And that's really what Agile is about. Remember I said in the very beginning, Agile starts with an organic growth of people adopting it at the team level because they're looking for more. They're not getting what they need up here from their leaders, so they took it upon themselves. And that was the impetus for the Agile Manifesto. People getting, kind of discouraged and thinking, there must be a better way. And then this whole middle enablement, the product management, the program management is how you actually deliver and who actually monitors that work and how that happens. And you can see they're only making 15% of the decisions, and this group up here is only making 5%. So if your organization is running like this, you are truly embracing agility and you are effectively responding to change. So ask yourself, do you have an empowered workforce that can actually make approximately or over 80 to 85% of the decisions on a day-to-day basis without going this way, without, oh, you guys do have annotations, great, without, having to pull this thing up and then pull it up here and then coming back down with that decision and then finally back down to the teams. That is not Agile. And that's small a Agile, which is nimble. So from my perspective, ask yourself, are you empowering your workforce to get this done? And if you're not, we probably need to talk. I'll be more than happy to discuss your situation and give you some tips and pointers. Just let me know. Like I said, I gave you my email address. And lastly, I know we're getting short on time here, and I don't want to be a time hog, but there is a case study in the back here that just shows the impact of some of the work my teams and I have done with clients. This was a very, very, very large U.S. bank that we did a complete end-to-end transformation, and it really was enabled by right here, these end-to-end processes. I'm a leanist first, that's where I came from, and found Agile afterwards. So process is very important to me, and culture is also very important to me. But then the whole impact of enterprise agility and the ability to rapidly respond to change is how you're going to survive and thrive well into the 21st century. So I will leave it at that and hand it back over to Ian.
Thank you, G. Awesome presentation and beautifully wrapping up all of the content that was delivered today. It was just fantastic. That focus on people, process and technology, I was reflecting back over the agenda, really captured all of the content that we shared today, from Marcus's section at the beginning in terms of design thinking, the piece I picked up in terms of process improvement and the cultural dynamics you were talking about, through Naveed and the purpose, power, performance, incredibly powerful presentation he delivered, and the teamwork with Vishy and Anthony in terms of digital transformation and the use of the technology that Niraj also talked about, and then finally through to that people element that Alexandra sort of said, and you just captured it. You crystallized it all in one model. It was as if we were working this presentation for months together. It was brilliant, absolutely. So on behalf of me, I'd like to just sort of say thank you to you all for joining today. I'd obviously like to thank extend my thanks to all of the panelists here. Really amazing content that's been shared with you. I'm sure you've hopefully got lots of value out of the session today. And with that, I shall hand back to Noor to close out the event. Back to you, Noor.
Thank you, Ian. On behalf of Conferencia World, I would like to thank all speakers and participants to the great event we have today. And we welcome everyone at our 3-day event, Global Opex and Business Transformation Summit online conference, which will be held on the 10th until 12th of March 2021. Do check our website at conferenciaworld.com to see our upcoming events. And thank you, everyone. Lastly, have a great rest of the day and see you all again next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye.
Okay, bye.